Hello, my name is Jeremy Barnes, and today I'm going to do a review for Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine, Deadpool's first movie in the MCU, and the first movie kind of bridging the Fox Marvel Universe with the MCU just in general, and the movie that brought back Hugh Jackman's Wolverine to put him in his comic accurate Wolverine costume. And I am wearing this shirt for a few reasons, and I might speak on them in a bit. But the first part of the review will be non-spoiler, and then at the end I'll go into some more specifics with spoiler details. Um, so I'm just gonna start this off with rating this movie as a summer blockbuster because that's what it is, and I would say maximum effort was put into it. Fucking perfect summer movie to watch just to fucking have a great time because that's what I fucking did in this movie. I had an amazing time the first time I watched it. I have seen it twice and I will only have seen it twice in its theatrical run because I do not plan to see it anymore until it is out for me to watch at home. Um, and yeah, it was a really fucking fun movie, really hilarious, which I'll go into specific a little bit later. So the first kind of part that I'm gonna talk about is the story of the movie, because I think story is always the most important thing in any movie or any, I guess, just any kind of piece of media that has a story. Um, that's the most important element, especially like for me personally, like as a writer myself. I've always kind of like gravitated to good stories. So for this one, I would say it was okay. But I would say the movie was more about the characters' relationship and how it grew into an unlikely friendship between Deadpool and Wolverine. And it wasn't really about like the story necessarily. It was just about their friendship. Um, like the plot wasn't really a huge focus, I would say. Um, and for that reason, I might not like it as much as some other Marvel movies or even like some of the X-Men movies. And I would also say, in addition to that, is that I feel like this movie felt more like an MCU movie than it did a Deadpool movie or a X-Men movie. And that could be in kind of a negative way. Um, I think that the reason why it was like a massively fun time is just because of the humor. Like I would say this is probably the funniest Deadpool movie, at least from that first watch that I had. That first watch experience of seeing this movie was like hilarious, man. Definitely the funniest movie that I've seen this year. Um, and yeah, I would say that first reaction was the most fun laughing that I've had watching any Deadpool movie. And I would say just any comic book movie probably in general. Um, so that was cool. The next part that I'm going to touch on are the characters, which in general I would say were amazing. They were used very well in this movie. Obviously, starting with Deadpool himself, since I would call this a Deadpool 3, even though the director doesn't want to call it that. It is definitely his movie. He is the first lead, and Wolverine is like kind of like a secondary lead. I would say Deadpool was perfect in this movie. He was perfectly Deadpool, and he did all the Deadpool things that we expect and would want to see him do. And I think sometimes even more so than he has in any of the other two movies. And he does some fucking wild shit in this movie. And I found out after the fact that this movie has like way more, like I think 100 more F-bombs dropped than any of the other two Deadpool movies. So he was really fucking pushing that R rating as being Disney's first real like R-rated movie, and he went overboard with the language, I think, especially. Um, so for Wolverine, I would say that he was pretty good, but in my opinion, not as cool as a word that they kind of introduce in this word. I mean, in this movie, which is called the anchor. being of a like cinematic universe, such as the MCU or the Fox X-Men movies as like their own separate universe. And the Wolverine from those movies, the ones that came before this, um, that Wolverine was considered the anchor being of that universe, which makes sense because he was kind of always the lead of that entire franchise, kind of in a similar way to how I would say that Iron Man is the lead of the MCU because he started it and he like died in Endgame, which a lot of people kind of had considered the real kind of end of the MCU, even though it has continued after his death. Um, and I'll touch more on that a little bit later in the spoiler section. But anyway, I would say that the Wolverine that was introduced in this movie, which is a new version, wasn't as cool as that original Wolverine in those X-Men movies. He just didn't really have that swag that Logan had in those other movies. And it is kind of for a story purpose, so I kind of understand why he was a little bit different. But people who read comics have said that this is like the most comic accurate Wolverine, which is cool. I'm not personally a comic book reader. I like comic book movies, but not necessarily comic books. I have read some, and some of them are pretty good. But I guess I like the movie Wolverine more than the comic book Wolverine. Um, but I still enjoyed him. He was still pretty cool. Um, and it was cool kind of seeing the like really rated R unleashed violent Wolverine, who we did get to see in Logan. But here I think it was like Logan, it was more out of necessity. Here he actually liked fucking killing people, I would say. So that was a little bit different, and I think maybe a little bit more comic booky in that way, which kind of fits because he wears the comic book costume. But now I'm gonna move on to kind of the overarching villain of the movie, who is Cassandra Nova, who we meet in the Void that was in the Loki series. And she is actually Charles Xavier's long lost twin, who in the comics was kind of like killed in the womb because they were like kind of had like a mental fight in the womb. And Charles won, but Cassandra Nova ended up still kind of manifesting through just pure kind of will into a physical form. Like I don't think she was born necessarily. But in this movie, they do it a little bit differently, where she was just kind of pruned into the void, like pretty much I think right away. So I'll probably go into it in the spoiler section, like kind of how I imagine how it went. But anyway, just in terms of how she was in the movie, I would say that she was awesome as the villain and super creepy. And like her powers are like super fucking powerful. Like her power level is insane, which is another reason why she was probably put in the void too, because she's just like too dangerous to keep out. And even despite all that, I feel like she's just really likable. Like I don't know what about her personality, but she is just really interesting to me and really cool. And I think the actor did a really good job portraying her, and kind of hitting all of these boxes of like who she is. So yeah, she was awesome. And then Mr. Paradox, who was kind of the lead on the TVA side of things in this movie, I would just describe him as a fucking asshole. And personally, like me, I hated him. Not necessarily like as a character, but who the character is. Like I don't like the type of person that he is, and I feel like he also was kind of boring. Like I thought he was gonna be kind of really cool from what I saw of him in the trailers and what I heard about the actor from the show Succession. I was expecting to like him more, but I kind of didn't, and I didn't really care about him at all. I was like, all right, like let's move on past this dude. I don't give a shit. Um, so the next, like I feel like those are kind of really the main four characters, but I'll throw in one more because he kind of does have a more important role, like throughout the movie, and it's Pyro, believe it or not, from X2 and X3, the original X-Men movies. I would say in this movie he was okay, but kind of similar to Wolverine, not as cool as he was in the X-Men movies. Um, but it was cool to see him return because I always fucking liked him a lot in those two movies. He was just really a really cool character in those ones, and he also got to get a like comic book type suit in this one, so that was kind of cool too. And then I'm just gonna group like a bunch of people in as like one character in the movie for the last kind of character that I talk about, which is Deadpool's F word, his family or like group of friends, because they're kind of like the anchor point for the plot of the movie. But the reason why I'm grouping them together instead of like talking about them individually is because they are, as a group, even like barely in the movie, and literally we only see them all together. We don't really get to see them individually like we have in past Deadpool movies. I feel like maybe the only one that we do is Peter, because we kind of see him in the beginning just with Wade. I think they work together at a car dealership. Um, and if you don't know him, he was in Deadpool 2. It has like a really fun kind of little small role in that movie. And I'll go into more of that sort of thing in the spoilers section. But yeah, I mean, they were kind of underwhelming, I would say, in this movie. And I thought they were going to play a bigger role than they really did. So I guess if I was to say that there was anything I was like disappointed about, even though I wouldn't say I was disappointed at all in this movie, like I have been in some other recent Marvel movies. But if there was one thing, I would say it's probably them, like the use of Deadpool's friends in this movie. I would say that's the one thing that I was kind of disappointed by. But now I'm gonna move into the action of the movie, which was fucking fantastic, in my opinion. The biggest thing, obviously, to mention is the violence. And I would say that the opening scene of this movie, which starts with an action scene, is a little gratuitous. Even more so than I think like any of the other Deadpool movies have been. But I feel like after that opening, it kind of like balances out after to being kind of more of like a grounded, realistic level of violence and gore. But it really starts kind of big and kind of slow motion, so you see the blood more in that opening scene. And then now I'm gonna kind of touch on each like action sequence, which obviously the first one is the opening. And about the opening, I would say that it was massively entertaining, and like I just had a fucking huge smile on my face when I was watching it. I was like, "What the fuck am I watching?" Because it's also like really shocking what happens in it. But the way that it was shot was fucking cool as hell. And like I said a little bit earlier, it's just so Deadpool, like what he does in it. And yeah, it was a really fucking fight scene, and they also play music heavily throughout the movie, and with the action scenes specifically. And this one, I think like it was just a really good pairing that they did for this opening scene. So it was super fun. Um, and then actually one thing that I didn't note down, but I do want to mention is that when the Marvel Studios title card comes up, it kind of ends with Deadpool like humming it and like welcoming himself into the MCU, and that was kind of funny because I noticed my mom had a reaction because I watched it with a group of people, 8 people, including my mom, and she was like 2 seats down from me, I think. But she had the same reaction that I did when Deadpool was humming it, and I feel like we both thought that somebody in the actual audience was doing that, but then like after a while we both figured out, oh, it's Deadpool doing this. So that was kind of funny. Uh, it was just like my reaction to it that made it funny. It wasn't necessarily him doing that that was funny, but it was just a like kind of fun moment in the experience of watching the movie the first time. And then the next like major action sequence was the fight that we seen a lot of in the trailers, which is Deadpool versus Wolverine in the Void, like in the kind of barren wasteland of the Void. And that fight was fucking awesome. It was super well choreographed, and like Deadpool had some cool ass moves that like I don't think I've ever seen him do stuff quite like that. So that was fucking dope. And then also Wolverine fought in a way that we've never seen before either. Um, he kind of gets down on all fours and like kind of crawls super fast towards Deadpool, and like that shit was like it tripped me out. I was like, what the fuck? That shit is crazy. Um, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily like a fan or like it was like super cool, but it was just kind of surprising because I've just never seen that. And I don't know if Wolverine ever fights like that in the comics or anything, but I've never seen that in any version that I've seen of Wolverine. So that was just kind of cool to see. Um, and then the next fight, it was also a little bit in the trailers, but they didn't. I don't think they've shown as much of it. It might be like actually a shorter fight too, which is probably why. But it's actually my favorite, and it's a fight in a Honda Odyssey van. And that fight was fucking awesome. And I think I liked it even more because of the soundtrack that was played with it, which was fucking hilarious. And the fight itself was hilarious, like by the end of it. Like the way that we see the fight end is kind of like a little joke in itself. Excuse me, but the whole fight was just fucking awesome. And it actually starts with like a pretty kind of serious moment, and then it just kind of goes out, and it was just like another super fun fight in the movie. And that one was my favorite because of how tight it was, because we were literally like in the van and seeing them fight is like such close quarters, and it was just super cool that they were able to do it, film it the way that they did, and still make it fucking badass. So that's why this one I would say is my favorite fight in the movie, and probably just my one of my favorite parts of the movie in general. I would say. And then the next part, the next like major action sequence was Deadpool and Wolverine kind of storming the castle, is what I call it, which is when they kind of go towards Cassandra to fight her. And we've seen in the trailers like she has this whole army of mutants and maybe some other characters as well. And I would say that fight was cool, but it didn't impress me as much as any of the previous ones, I would say, that I've mentioned. But there are some like more characters that weren't in the trailers that are part of this fight, and obviously I cannot touch on those because I don't want to spoil it. But those characters, it was cool seeing them in there and them get some action in the movie. Um, so I'd say that was probably the best part of it. But otherwise, it didn't really impress me too much. And then I would say pretty much the last action sequence in the movie is Deadpool and Wolverine versus what they call the Deadpool Corps, which was very briefly teased in the trailer. Um, but it's basically just like the multiverse Deadpools, like just a bunch of different Deadpools, and they said that there's like 100 of them. So this is actually the most of any character that we've seen in any superhero movie, except maybe besides Spider-Man and Across the Spider-Verse. But I mean, honestly, I might count this even more than that though, because there were actually like that many people on set. Whereas Spider Verse, it was like all animated, and most of them were kind of just background characters. But here, like, it was literally a fucking army of Deadpools, which was kind of cool to see. And there's like a lot of different versions, and most of them I've never even heard of or seen before. Even though a lot of them, if not all of them, are from the comics. But obviously, I don't know. I don't know which ones were newly created, which ones existed before. And I'd say that fight was definitely fun, like more fun than the castle fight, but also in my opinion, forgettable. Like I don't think I'm gonna be talking about this fight way down the line in the future. Um, it is just kind of whatever for me personally. But another reason why it maybe doesn't hit as much for me is I would say this definitely is the most CG fight. All the other ones are super practical. This one you could definitely tell that there was some CG involved. And the whole fight isn't CG. It is a practical fight. Like they do have all these people and then obviously the stunt performers for Deadpool and Wolverine kind of going at it. But there is some CG involved, especially kind of the way the fight ends, which I personally didn't like the shot that they ended the fight with, but it is a very comic booky shot that some people would probably like a lot. But for me, I don't know, it just kind of took me out of it a little bit. And I guess I could say this, it's not really a spoiler, but this is the fight where we see Wolverine don his cowl for the first time in cinematic history. And I think that kind of had a part of it as well, because the at least like the first time I watched it, when I first saw him put the cowl on, I didn't really love it at first. I was like, I don't know, it kind of doesn't look good. And maybe it's just something that we gotta get used to because we have never seen it on his face before. So it just kind of like, we have to kind of adjust to it. Like Deadpool, we never saw him like enough without his mask to like really have this big kind of shift when he put the mask on in the actual first Deadpool movie. And Deadpool just fucking works perfectly. Like everything about his look on film works perfectly. Like the mask, it works. The eyes obviously are CG because they have the like expressions that he could make, and the kind of mask is similar in that way to Deadpool's for Wolverine. But it just like I said, I needed to adjust for a little bit. But also because I think some of the action was CG, it just kind of made it look a little bit off to me. But I think it gets better as the movie goes on, and he actually keeps it on for like longer than I expected. I thought they were gonna like literally rip it off during that fight, and I would have been okay with it in the moment because I kind of didn't like it at first. But I'm glad that they didn't because it actually looks super fucking cool later in the movie. But I definitely think it has grown on me. Like the second time I watched it, I accepted it more, and I actually did kind of like it. Um, but there's actually a set photo that I saw of the mask, and I think it actually looks better without the white eyes. And I think it's just like an open thing, but because it's like a cowl where like it kind of like comes out of his eyes. In the set photo, it looks just completely dark, like it's just black. You don't see his pupils or anything. I actually think it looks cooler like that than it does with the fucking white eyes that can like express. And I feel like another reason why I didn't really love it as much is because I feel like it didn't even express as much as Deadpool expresses with his eyes with the CG. So I feel like the white eyes kind of weren't even necessary because they don't use it to that same effect. So I feel like, I mean, I don't know how it would look without them. Like if we were just able to see Hugh Jackman's eyes underneath it, I feel like it might look worse like that. Like it might look more weird. But like I said, if it was just all black where we can't even see his eyes, I think that would look just perfect. Like I think that's the best way to continue using it if they decide to in the future, which I'm assuming they will because it's so iconic. And most like fans, I think, of comic books or superheroes, I think would look like it, or from what I've heard, they do like it. So yeah, but we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. Um, but yeah, I would say that's my second least favorite, and then the other fight that I referenced before this is my least favorite fight in the movie. But now I'm going to talk about the humor. So, as I already said, I would say on my first watch, it was probably definitely the funniest Deadpool movie yet. Um, there's a lot of like inside kind of jokes, like people who are comic book fans, comic book movie fans, wouldn't understand the most, or some of those jokes might not even hit for like a general audience member. But there are some jokes that I think will hit for general audience members because it kind of just touches on pop culture in general, and like even some celebrity stuff like with the actors in the movie, because he obviously Deadpool breaks the fourth wall, if you didn't know. So that stuff is all really funny, and I think I pretty much understood all the jokes that were made, like all of the, or most of them, I would say, I understood, and they all like hit. Like I was laughing at all of them. So it was super funny. And then there's one character that was kind of funny too. He's kind of a spoiler character, so I'm not gonna mention him. But I'll talk more about him in the spoiler section. So that's all for the humor. I thought it was super funny, and I really liked it a lot. I had an amazing time because of the humor. mostly, I would say. Now I'm gonna talk about the costumes because obviously we got to talk about the costumes. Wolverine finally got his comic book accurate yellow and blue costume, and they were great throughout the movie. Um, Wolverine's was pretty much perfect, I would say. Um, the one complaint, which I guess I don't really care about, but I think it would look a little bit better, is something that a lot of other fans have mentioned, which is just like to have the really perfect Wolverine, most iconic look. They would have needed to keep the shoulder pads on over his like on over his arms when he takes the sleeves off. And the sleeves kind of rip through wear and tear in the movie, and I don't know when specifically the shoulder pads come off. I'm guessing it's that part when the sleeves come off. It just comes off with the sleeve. But the perfect look would have been if the shoulder pads were still intact, but just the sleeves came off, and he still had the gloves on with where the claws come out of. And then obviously with the mask on, like that would have been the perfect Wolverine look. But we only get to see that in toy form, unfortunately. Um, but what I will say is we do see a bunch of different versions of Wolverine in this movie, and there are other versions who do have kind of a more, in my opinion, iconic Wolverine look than the yellow and blue costume did. Um, and that those other versions are also fucking perfect too. So this one was still damn good, and if he brings this one back, I'd be okay with it. But if they actually change it to my personal favorite costume that I've seen of Wolverine, which is the brown and yellow, I would actually prefer that because I always thought that was a better costume than the yellow and blue. And yeah, so that's all I'm gonna say for now about that. Deadpool, I feel like his costume had some very minor improvements. Like I do prefer this version than in the previous two Deadpool movies, and it's something that the TVA actually gives him when he goes there, because he has his old costume back home, but when he leaves, obviously his universe, he comes here and they like suit him up, and it's like a bit of a deeper red that he has, and it's just like a kind of more streamlined version. Like it's pretty much the same design, just like a little bit better, in my opinion. So it was a really cool costume. And then there's also kind of a spoiler reason for why Wolverine specifically wears the yellow and blue, which I liked a lot, but I'm not gonna say what that reason is here. You'll have to go to my spoiler section to find out about that. But I really like that they made that a kind of a reason because it kind of makes sense that Wolverine wouldn't want to wear a costume like this just for the type of person that he is, and to have him wear it in this movie and after so much time that he's never worn it before, to like actually make that a plot point, I think was a good idea, and the way that they did it was really, I think, good. Pyro's costume, like I said, also comic book kind of costume. It was nice to see, but the design of it, like, it's kind of whatever. Pyro doesn't particularly look cool in my opinion from the comic book look. But it was cool to see him in one since he also didn't get to wear a costume at all actually in the X-Men movies. He was always just wearing regular clothes. Um, I guess he's kind of similar to Wolverine in that regard. Like he never really took the X-Men very seriously in those movies. Um, and just because I am talking about characters right now, here's your spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. I don't know why I miscounted. Spoilers, okay? So skip this part. I will have timestamps in the video, so you could skip this part to the next section of the non-spoiler part, but I'm going to touch on some of the characters who were spoiler characters that you don't want to know or that you shouldn't know before seeing the movie. And one of them I would say is a cameo, a little bit of an extended cameo because he kind of shows up twice, and it's actually my favorite cameo in the movie. and it is Chris Evans as Johnny Storm, the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four movies back in the day. He was fucking good. He was hilarious, and even though I did kind of see like the same Chris Evans Human Torch that I saw in those other movies, he was also kind of different from those movies. And I think that could be for two reasons. One, obviously, is that he's older. Chris Evans himself is older, so they had to make the character also an older version of Johnny Storm from those movies. Two, maybe because he's older, he swears a lot more, or just because he's in a rated R movie, he's able to swear. Um, and then I guess three is that I feel like he's not the same exact Human Torch from those movies. I think it's a variant of that Human Torch, but not the same exact person. Um, and yeah, but he was fucking hilarious in this movie, and Chris Evans really got to unleash with the language, and he actually says some probably some fucking crazier shit than Deadpool does. Uh, but he was fucking funny as hell though. Um, and I don't know if Human Torch like swears in the comics or if he's like as foul mouthed as he was here, but I could see it though. Like for the type of character that Johnny Storm is, I could see that him being like that. So I just really liked it, and just as a Marvel movie fan who actually liked those Fantastic Four movies, like I actually do enjoy them, especially the first one. And Human Torch was always my favorite in them too. So him coming back in here and then also being my favorite cameo in this movie was just kind of perfect. So that was dope. Human Torch's costume was different, which is another reason why I think it's a different version of the Human Torch. Like obviously, over time their costumes could have changed, but I just think it's a completely different version of Human Torch. I feel like this costume is a lot more basic than the one in the Fantastic Four movies. Next big one, I did not fucking expect, so I was like, holy shit, they actually did it. Was Wesley Snipes coming back as Blade, and that cameo actually got some claps in at least one of the two screenings that I've seen of the movie. So people fucking fuck with that for real. And I have had the fortune of watching the Blade trilogy more recently in my life because I never watched it as a kid because it was a rated R movie, and I don't even know if like my dad has even seen it. Um, but I watched all three in college. The only one I think is actually like good that I would rewatch is the first one. But Wesley Snipes as Blade is just always fucking snaps, and he's still snapped in this movie. He's just so fucking badass, and he was badass in here too. And his fucking look was perfect. And Wesley Snipes has fucking aged gracefully. Like he does not look like how old he is. He's in his fucking 60s, and he still looks fucking damn good. And Bladed looks like a badass still, and he is a badass still. So that was fucking dope. And the reason why I didn't expect him to be in this movie was because supposedly him and Ryan Reynolds hated each other. But I just seen an interview with Wesley Snipes after the fact of doing this movie that said they always liked each other. That was always just kind of a gag they had, kind of similar to I guess Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds' online relationship, where they kind of poke fun at each other all the time. But maybe there was some truth though to the Wesley Snipes and Ryan Reynolds thing. Like they might have had a bad time working on Blade Trinity, which was a movie that starred Ryan Reynolds as well. And the first time they kind of knew each other, met each other. But maybe like they quickly got over it, or just at some point since then they've gotten over it. But people just always just assumed they still hated each other. That's kind of why I didn't expect it to happen. But I guess they're actually friends, and Ryan Reynolds introduced him as his friend at Comic Con because they had a whole panel kind of celebrating this movie's release, and they played the movie on the Thursday before the like big release on Friday, July 26th. So so that's kind of cool. And even if they were kind of not on good terms, I'm happy that they were able to kind of put their differences aside and make this movie and have this cameo in here. And actually, the cameos, starting with Blade, in this movie, that I'm about to mention, are not really cameos. They're more extended supporting roles. They're definitely smaller roles for sure, but they have enough in the movie to make them actual like characters and not just a cameo. The next one is one that I had heard about, but I like literally forgot about all of this as being a possibility before I started watching this movie for the first time. And and it was like still like just kind of a surprise to me, even though I had heard about it and I was like expecting it at one point before the movie came out. But Elektra from the Daredevil movie, and also she had her own movie too, so she does exist on her own, and she was on her own in this movie. Daredevil did not make an appearance, but Jennifer Garner did return as Elektra from those movies, which were also released back then. Her costume, I would say, was a slight improvement on her Daredevil costume, but maybe not as good as her costume in the Elektra movie, because that one was the most like actual red. This one has a hint of red, but it's kind of more of a faded red, like Daredevil from the Netflix show's costume. Um, and the design of it is also like a little bit different. I would say maybe not as good as any of the two other costumes, but because of the color, I do like it maybe a little bit better than the Daredevil movie's costume. And Jennifer Garner was like really cool, I think, in this movie as well. She didn't get to do like as much, obviously, and I feel like she didn't stand out as much as like Blade or anybody else. But like they actually gave her some time to shine in this movie, so that was pretty cool. And then the one that was revealed in the final trailer for the movie, so I knew about it already, and it shocked me in the trailer because I kind of wasn't expecting it when I saw it in the trailer, but obviously seeing it, I knew it was coming in the movie. Is Laura, who was X-23 in the Logan movie, and the same actress came back to play her, Daphne Keane, so that was dope. And she was cool in this movie. Her costume though was pretty basic, unfortunately. Like I thought she was gonna get an actual like superhero costume, but she doesn't. She just kind of wears regular clothes, kind of like how she did in that movie. Um, so yeah, and I feel like she wasn't quite as badass because she wasn't as ferocious as the young X-23 was. But there's kind of a story reason for that too. Um, and it's that like, well, I think I'll talk about it later more. I'm just gonna leave it like at that for now. And then Gambit is the last major like supporting role that shows up in the same sequence. Like they all show up together. And we finally got to see. Well, I was personally wasn't waiting for it, but Channing Tatum finally got his chance to play Gambit. He was waiting for it since he was cast as Gambit. He was supposed to get his own Gambit movie when they were making the X-Men movies with the younger X-Men cast, but it just never happened. It never panned out. It never got far enough for it to come to fruition until now. Ryan Reynolds gave him the chance, and he came and he did his thing. His costume was comic accurate, but in my opinion, not good. Like I didn't like it personally. It looked very kind of like rubbery or like plasticky, and that's why I didn't like it. Like the way that it looks as a comic accurate costume is cool, but the just the material of it I didn't like, and I feel like just Channing Tatum as Gambit, like his face in that mask, just doesn't fit for me. Um, but I'll talk more about that later when I talk about the characters and their use in the movie specifically. Right now, I'm mostly just talking about the costumes. Um, but it was cool seeing him. Like we at least got to see that before we probably get a new Gambit in the mainline MCU, which I do hope we see. I will say though, I did like Taylor Kitsch Gambit in X-Men Origins Wolverine though a lot. So that's something. Okay, so spoilers done. Now I'm going back to spoiler free. The next section I'm going to be talking about is the music. So obviously there's two parts, as there usually is. Well, I guess not usually, but in this movie there is the score and the soundtrack for the movie. So the score, I would say, was pretty damn good. There were some familiar sounds, like just like the types of music that we've heard. Um, it kind of reminded me of Across the Spider-Verse's like kind of synth sound. Um, but there were also some old themes that were brought back in this movie, that were used. I think only really one that I could think of, but maybe there were other ones too. But there's like some themes from Logan, which makes sense because this is following Logan as Hugh Jackman's next movie as Wolverine. Um, so yeah, but overall, like I don't think it stood out as much, and I listened to like the whole score separately after the movie, and like I didn't love the score. The way that it was used in the movie is also kind of similar to the way I viewed the soundtrack, which was really good in the movie, but not really great on its own. So the soundtrack is good, but it's mostly just kind of perfect the way that the songs are used in the movie. But the songs overall, I wouldn't say are like some of the best songs ever. At least some of them. Like some of them are like really good songs, but uh, y- yeah, like just listening to it as a soundtrack, like as one album, it doesn't really kind of flow as well. But in the movie, it makes sense when and where the songs are used. Um, so the opening fight song is NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye. And it was fucking hilarious because there's kind of a reason to use that song in the movie. And I didn't know this until afterward. Like I saw other people figure this out. But there's actually like a X-Men kind of movie reference for why that song was used in this movie. And it's fucking hilarious because this song was actually used in X2 when Pyro and Rogue, and I believe Bobby's in the car too, because they're going to his house with Wolverine driving. And Pyro's like, I can't just sit in the car in silence. So he turns the radio on, and it's bye bye bye. And Wolverine's like, what the fuck? Turn that shit off. So I think that's why Deadpool chose to use this song in this movie in the opening, kind of reintroducing Wolverine into, well, his movie, and then also I guess bringing him along with him into the MCU. So that's kind of funny and meta. And I had no idea until later, but it is. I saw the scene. That is the song that plays. So it's just fucking funny and perfect on so many levels. And then my favorite fight scene in the movie, the song that plays there, might also be a reference to something else, but it's I think it's called "The One That I Want" from Grease, the song from the end of Grease, with John Travolta and fuck, why don't I know her name? Shit, the one that they both sing together, and they do the dance in the movie. This song plays in the car fight scene, and it's just fucking like I don't know why it's perfect, but it is fucking perfect. Like the lyrics don't necessarily have anything to do with what's going on in the fight, but it does have something to do with the relationship between Deadpool and Wolverine. So that was just like a fucking amazing sequence, and I love Grease. Like Grease was one of my childhood movies with my siblings that we would always watch, and that song is really good. And both times I watched the movie, I was like tapping my feet to the fucking song too while it was happening. The first time I was having a good ass fucking time. But the reference for it might be the Punisher movie starring Thomas Jane because John Travolta played the villain in that movie, which I actually forgot until I was making my notes for this review. So maybe that's why he used it. I don't know for sure, but could be. Uh, so if that is the reason, that's kind of funny too. But that's definitely a like way deeper cut than the X-Men one, because obviously Punisher is not like an X-Men movie. Um, so and we haven't seen it. You know, that's a long kind of. Most people maybe have in today's world hasn't seen the Punisher movie, and I would say probably less so than like Blade or something like that. So, and I bet you like nobody knows John Travolta from that movie either. If they've seen him in that movie, they definitely like took that out of their memory. So that's just kind of something funny that could be a reason why they brought this song in here. So now I'm gonna talk about the cameos in a spoiler-free way. Just about like how I felt about them in the movie. I would say that they were fun, but very sparingly used. Aside from a decent supporting group that had a little bit more to do. Um, and I'm gonna talk about them more specifically in the spoiler section. And I did, if you've already seen the part about the characters and costumes spoiler section. Um, and like all the characters that we saw in the background of Cassandra's like base, they're literally just like that. Like they're just background characters. They're not really characters in their own right. They're just kind of an army for Cassandra. Um, but the other ones that are a little bit larger roles, supporting roles, it kind of makes sense for what the movie is, which I guess I can say I haven't really said that part yet, but it's a love letter to all those Fox movies and kind of all the Marvel movies that came before the MCU. Obviously, aside from Spider-Man, because we already got a celebration of Spider-Man movies with Spider-Man No Way Home. So outside of that, this is a celebration of the X-Men primarily because obviously Deadpool comes from the X-Men world with mutants and all that, but also some of the other ones as well, because a lot of them are forgot in today's world of the MCU. But without those, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today, which is, for me, like perfect. Like I've loved the MCU from beginning, and even though there have been some missteps recently, I have still been actively like interested and for the most part enjoying them. So I like that they kind of called back to some of these other ones. Like I like the X-Men movies. Some of the other ones I don't care for as much, and like I would be fine kind of moving on past them, but it was nice to kind of see and pay respects to those movies because without them, like I said, we wouldn't have got to where we are. And one of the things that they pay tribute to in this movie is like literally the first Marvel movie that really blew up. So that was cool, and it was something that I actually wasn't expecting to see. To wrap it up, the spoiler-free section, kind of going off of that last point, I would say that this was the perfect way to properly end the Fox film universe with the Marvel characters if they choose to end it here. There's still room to actually continue telling more stories in this kind of universe separate from the MCU. But if they want to, this would be the perfect way to do it because the last actual X-Men movie that was released was the worst X-Men movie, and I don't ever want to see it again. Maybe I will. I don't know if I give it a chance again. I do own it because I accidentally bought it. I was trying to rent it just to see it. I didn't see it in theaters, but I accidentally bought it, so I do own it. So I can't see it without like paying more money. Um, that movie was terrible, so it was a horrible way to end the X-Men film universe. Logan would have been a good ending if it ended there, but it didn't. There was like I think three movies after Logan, because the Deadpool 2 came out after Logan, and then I think it was Dark Phoenix and New Mutants was the actual like last movie I think released. And I actually liked the New Mutants. Not as much as like the best X-Men movies, but I did like actually really enjoy that movie. But obviously it wasn't really a tribute to the X-Men movies. It was its own kind of new thing. But this was a tribute to the X-Men movies, and it would be the perfect way to kind of tie it up. Like we got Charles Xavier's perfect ending in Logan, just like we got Logan's perfect ending in Logan, and this is more of a tribute to all the other characters in the universe. Even though one thing I can say is that the X-Men don't really factor in here, like the X-Men themselves don't really factor in. I would still be happy if this was the last we saw of that version of X-Men. So for the very least, it was worth it for that, I think. Um, and to see Hugh Jackman in the comic accurate Wolverine suit. And if he retires again, I'd be fucking good. Like I don't need anything else from him. I'm grateful he came back to do this, and I'm grateful for all he put throughout all those movies before. So yeah. Um, Now, just briefly, because this is something that I was expecting to see in this movie, especially because Kevin Feige was like saying how this movie was gonna really start the X-Men in the MCU. It doesn't. Um, it's really its own thing, and it's more going off the back of the former Fox X-Men franchise. But I also want to speak briefly on these kind of setups for Secret Wars, since this was like a multiverse movie, and Secret Wars is the next like ending Avengers movie. It's gonna end the multiverse saga, just like how Endgame ended the Infinity Saga of the MCU. This movie actually has little to none, no setups for Secret Wars, which actually works in the movie's favor, I think, because it focuses on telling its own story. Like it's not about that. It's not about the multiverse stuff. It's about this relationship between Deadpool and Wolverine, how they start off at one place and end the movie in another place. So it's kind of good that they didn't rely too heavily or like really push this Secret Wars thing, and it was just able to be its own movie and stand on its own right. But I feel like they did add just enough to the overarching narrative of the MCU, bringing in some kind of lore from Loki with the TVA to have us pondering what could happen next, which I think is maybe the best way to do it. Like I as a fan of the MCU and like watching literally everything in the MCU, I want to know everything, and I like to get excited for the next thing. Um, I do like how when a movie could just be its own thing too, because sometimes they do, I think in recent times especially, they do rely on the next thing. Like the director of Logan is not a fan of it. He considers it like this movie's a trailer for the next movie, and he doesn't like that. So I could understand people who feel like that. I've never had a problem with it because I'm just like obviously a massive fan of it. But I like that this movie didn't go there, and it was just able to do its own thing. And both of the previous Deadpool movies were like that too, and like they were always in their own little bubble. They referenced everything else, but it was always its own thing. So that it continues to be its own thing, even though, like I said, it feels more like an MCU movie. I think it's just like the buddy aspect of it is what made me feel like that. Because we've had a lot of like team up movies in recent times in the MCU. I think starting with Thor Ragnarok with Thor and Hulk is kind of what really started that kind of trend in the MCU, and that's what makes it feel like that for me. Whereas like the first and second Deadpool movie felt more like Deadpool movies because it was Deadpool, not Deadpool and somebody else. And yes, he had his supporting cast, but they were supporting cast. Like here, Wolverine is literally the second lead, and that's why I feel like maybe the other characters from Deadpool's supporting entourage were kind of sidelined in this one. Um, but now I'm just gonna give you a score out of 10, and I would rate this movie an 8.5 out of 10. It was super enjoyable, but it did lack some of the heart of those first two Deadpool movies. There were some emotional scenes, but they didn't really hit as like well as they did for me in Deadpool 1 or 2. And for that reason, just really quick, I guess I could do it now because it's not really talking about spoilers. I'll rank the Deadpool movies, and then I'll do the same for movies like starring Wolverine. as a lead, and then all of them together. So for Deadpool, for that reason that I just mentioned, I would say this is the worst Deadpool movie, which originally I did not think that was the case. It was never my favorite. Both times I watched it, Deadpool 1 I would consider my favorite Deadpool movie and the best. Originally, I said Deadpool and Wolverine was number 2, and then Deadpool 2 was number 3. But after my second time viewing it, I would say no, Deadpool 2 is still a better Deadpool movie than Deadpool and Wolverine. And I think it's because of that factor of Deadpool's supporting cast not really being a big part of this movie. It's really sharing the spotlight between two characters, Deadpool and Wolverine, even though I don't think Wolverine gets as much as Deadpool does in terms of like importance. Even though I think Ryan Reynolds tries to make Wolverine really important in this movie, and Hugh Jackman felt like Ryan Reynolds gave him a lot as Wolverine. I feel like there was some missing that we could have got to make it even better for Wolverine and also for Deadpool. So Deadpool 1, 2, Deadpool Wolverine. It goes in decreasing order from release. Wolverine, this was always the case. It was always my least favorite Wolverine movie because, like I said, it's he doesn't get as much spotlight. I think he's kind of more used as kind of like fan service, I would say, and not really given him a kind of complete arc. Um, my favorite Wolverine movie, of course, is Logan. That movie is considered a masterpiece, and I would be accepting of that title. Personally, I don't consider it a masterpiece, but it's a really damn good movie, and I think easily the best Wolverine movie. Second would be The Wolverine, which was also directed by James Mangold, who did Logan. And I think that one, just because of how kind of serious it takes Logan, and it was cool because that was like the first movie to show Logan at a kind of diminishing health, where he like loses his powers for part of it. So we see him actually like be able to be hurt, which was cool. And he's just a badass in that movie too. Uh, so yeah, and then third, X-Men Origins Wolverine, which a lot of people say is not good. I actually like that movie a lot still. I think it's a super fun movie. Some of the action is like kind of over the top and super unrealistic, but it's just badass. So, like the only thing I didn't like about that movie was Deadpool because they just did him dirty with sewing his mouth shut and he doesn't look anything like Deadpool at the end of it. And I guess it's because he wasn't supposed to be Deadpool. He's supposed to be a pre-Deadpool, but it was just dumb and a horrible look and didn't make any sense with his fucking swords coming out of his hands. Cause how the fuck would he be able to fucking bend his joints with that shit in his arm? But anyway, I would still put it above this because it was more of a Wolverine movie than this was, and that's the only reason. Like overall, which this will be reflected in my list, combining all the movies. I'm gonna rank them all just in terms of like my enjoyment as well. Those first two Deadpool movies and Wolverine movies, I was ranking them as a Deadpool movie, as a Wolverine movie. Now I'm just as a movie in general. So number one, Logan. Number two, Deadpool. Number three, Deadpool 2. Number four, Deadpool and Wolverine. I do enjoy it more than The Wolverine and X-Men Origins Wolverine. So there it is. Pretty much like almost right at an hour for the non-spoiler part. Now I'm gonna go into spoilers. I'm not sure how long this is gonna take, but I'll give you 5 seconds to leave if you have not seen the movie yet before I go fully into my spoiler talk. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the costumes on why Wolverine wears the yellow and blue suit. The reason he does is that This Wolverine in this movie is considered as the worst Wolverine, and it's because he let down the X-Men team that he was a part of, and by association, I guess, and from his response to losing them, Mr. Paradox says his world didn't go extinct or anything like that, but he made mutants look worse, like in the media in his universe, and it's because the X-Men were killed by humans, and we don't find out how they were killed by humans, but I guess the most obvious thing that would have been able to do it are the Sentinels. But the entire X-Men team was killed, and he finds them because he wasn't with them when it happened. He was just off drinking somewhere, just a drunk Wolverine, and then he finds them dead, and there's nothing he could do about it at that point because they're just already dead. But he responds by lashing out, going after the people that did it, and killing them. But then even going beyond that and like killing innocent people as well. So he's like even more of a drunk after that. He's just like depressed and just drinking away his life. But when Deadpool finds him at the bar, he sees that he's wearing the yellow and blue suit underneath his like regular clothes. And the reason for that is that it's the only thing that he could remember the X-Men by. So he wears it as a memoriam. I don't know if it's necessarily to remind him of his failure or just to remember the team and like what he actually liked about the X-Men. Um, but I like that reasoning. Like that was a good reason to put it in this movie and to make it like, okay, after all these years now he wears it. Like why? I like that they gave that a reason, and the reason for it was a really good plot point, and it kind of adds to his arc in the movie because in the beginning he's like, I'm a fuck up, like whatever he's saying about me is true, like I'm nothing, I'm a piece of shit. But he earns that hero status that Deadpool sees in him and that he's always seen in Wolverine. He's always admired Wolverine, and this is the worst Wolverine, but he learns to be a hero and he's able to live up to the Wolverines that actually are heroes by the end of it. And that's why we'd never see him put the mask on until the end when he's side by side with Deadpool, and it actually feels like an earned moment. So that was fucking cool. Um, Now, as for the Grease song in the car fight scene, I think the reason why it kind of works with the lyrics is that Deadpool like loves Wolverine and Wolverine's the one that he wants, and it kind of adds this like homoerotic element to that fight scene because they both are like enjoying the fight, like they both love fighting each other and like fucking each other up with their blood splattering all over the car and all over each other. And the thing that the fight ends on that was like a joke is that it like cuts away, but then we see them after the fight, like after time has passed, and they're both like passed the fuck out. And Wolverine won the fight because he tied Deadpool up in the fucking seatbelt in the car. So that shit was funny. That was the only way to get them to like stop, and then they both passed out in that state. So that was fucking hilarious. Um, and then for the music, the one theme that was brought back that I know for sure was a theme that was brought back is Laura's X-23 theme or like her theme from Logan. Because whenever she's gonna be involved, I think they use it twice in the movie at least with her. When they actually show the events of Logan in the TVA, we hear that music play that was in Logan, and the TVA all like look up to that version of Wolverine because he died like a noble sacrifice, in a really like cool way. And then when X-23 actually shows up in this movie, we hear it again. So that was cool. Um, And then as for like the stuff that I mentioned in the non-spoiler part, I think that pretty much covers it. So now I'm going into just completely new talking points. And the first thing that I want to talk about are things that could have been better in the movie. So like I said before, I wasn't disappointed by it really, but there were some things that I think would have made the movie better, like moved it from an 8.5 up to a 9.5, for example. Like the first time I watched it, I originally gave this movie a 9 out of 10, but on the second watch, it kind of went down a little bit. It's still a really enjoyable movie, and that first experience is still gonna obviously impact my overall thoughts about it because I think that first experience is always the most important experience. Even if a movie gets better with more rewatches, that first experience is still kind of like what solidifies it as good or bad. Um, but I feel like the Wolverine versus Sabretooth fight was way too short. I feel like it should have been an actual fight because it would have added a little bit more to Wolverine's side of things. Um, because like I said, he didn't get as much as Deadpool did, and maybe we could have gotten like some backstory about it. Like they do bring up that they're brothers, so this version, or maybe Deadpool's just talking about the version that he had already seen in X-Men Origins Wolverine, which that version of those two characters were brothers. In the original X-Men movie, which starred this version of Sabretooth, played by Tyler Mane, I don't think they were necessarily brothers, or at least they never say it in that movie. But there could have just been a little bit more there. It's literally they just run at each other and Wolverine takes his head off. And somebody else pointed out that I just saw in a video that it's a callback to a line in X-Men Origins Wolverine, where Wolverine says that to Victor Creed, like I'm gonna fucking take your head off, or I'm gonna take your fucking head off, something like that. And that's what he does here. And I feel like that's fine. Like he could have still died, but I feel like there should have been more of a fight before he took his head off, just to make it like more of a moment, you know? Because they literally brought him back just to die. So I don't know, but it's a small thing. Like obviously, I'm not like mad about it, but if there was a little bit more to it, I think it would have been cooler. Um, I also think that Cassandra Nova should have had more screen time, especially because I liked her a lot. She wasn't really like that important in the grand scheme overall. She was just kind of a big threat, and a threat not just in the void. She actually comes out of the void, so she becomes a threat to the entire multiverse. But obviously, it's contained in this movie. Like it's not gonna be an overarching thing. Like they end that threat in this movie. They tie it up, which kind of sucks because like I would have liked to see more of her in the future. But she was cool in every scene that she was in. So yeah, and I think my favorite Marvel movies are the ones that have good villains who are like important. Like she's a good villain, but she wasn't really that important in the grand scheme of things. So that's why I say that. Another thing is the timeline specificity. Like the way that they used the timeline in this movie was closer to the way that the Fox X-Men movies used time in a very confusing way because the actual time that this movie is set in, like the year, is our present day 2024. In Deadpool's world, that's the year that it is when he starts, and I believe that's still the same year when he goes back to his world by the end of the movie. But there were parts from other movies that were like kind of seemingly supposed to be within that same universe or that same timeline that were actually further in the future. So it didn't really make sense. So like what I'm talking about is after Paradox tells Deadpool that about anchor beings and that Logan was the anchor being of his universe, which he means Deadpool's universe. That's why his universe is gonna wither away, and Paradox is trying to just kill it immediately instead of letting it die slowly, because he doesn't want to just waste his life just watching it die, because it's doomed to die. So, like, why? Because he likes how the TVA used to do things when it was under Kang's control. But now, like in the TVA side of things, this movie is set after the Loki season 2 finale, where Loki is now controlling the multiverse and keeping it all together. And the TVA in the inside has changed, where they're not pruning branched timelines anymore. They're letting them flourish as long as, I guess, there are no incursions happening. And I don't know if they know about incursions happening. I'm sure they have heard about them because Reed Richards, another version of Reed Richards, spoke on them in Multiverse of Madness. So I'm assuming the TVA must know about them, but I don't know if like that those have continued to happen now in Loki's multiverse. But after Deadpool finds out about them, he's like, okay, I could just go get another Wolverine. So he goes to a bunch of different universes looking for the perfect Wolverine to help him. After he goes to Logan's gravesite, because he's like, there's no way Logan's dead. Like we have a healing factor. He can't die. So he digs up his corpse and he discovers that he actually is dead. But that timeline wise doesn't make sense because it's supposed to be 2024 for Deadpool, but Logan takes place, I think, in 2029 or something like that. So at that time, Logan shouldn't be dead yet. But I don't know if he went to like that timeline branch of his universe. I guess like my interpretation of the way that they're using anchor beings in this movie is that an anchor being is not just one person that keeps one timeline together. It's the person that like they're the anchor to the entire multiverse around one timeline. So I guess you could consider Earth 10005 as the sacred timeline of the X-Men film franchise. But there are branch timelines from that kind of circle around it. Like we see some of the TVA monitors, like the graphics, there's like some branches around that. So Logan is one of the branches, but because he died in any of them, all of them die. That's like my interpretation of it. So, but I don't know like why. Yeah, I mean, I guess that is why. That's why Deadpool would go to that time when Logan was dead, because he doesn't believe like that Logan was dead, but then he finds out, oh yeah, he's dead, because all of his fucking most of his corpse has fully kind of decomposed. Like there's actually still some skin on his skeleton, which was kind of gross. But no, he was dead. And he couldn't go back in time because that's not how it works. Like Endgame had already established that. Like if you change anything in the past, it just creates a new branch. But that Logan is still dead. So the fact that he's dead, all the X-Men timelines in the film franchise are all gonna die. That's my interpretation. But yeah, I mean, I guess it works when you think about it like that. But it was still kind of confusing, especially the first time I watched it. But one thing I did like is that they added graphics with the universe numbers when they were in the two, I guess, main universes. Because when he was jumping to all these other universes that he was just in briefly looking for a new Wolverine to help him, they didn't give universe names for all of those, like numbers. But they did for the main MCU, which is they're calling Earth 616, which was established also in Multiverse of Madness. And this is like the film version of 616. So there's kind of like you could think of it if you're a comic book fan as two different multiverses. There's a comic book multiverse, and then there's a film multiverse. So the MCU is Earth 616 in the film multiverse, and then Earth 616 in the comics is the comic book multiverse. I'm a person who does think that they should be called different things. Like before Kevin Feige said that the MCU was Earth 616, it was always referred to as Earth 199999, which is the way that Miguel O'Hara referenced it in Across the Spider-Verse. Um, but it is what it is. Like the MCU is calling it 616, so that's what it's going to be called as. And they showed that actually, like on the screen, and then when we went back to Deadpool's world, we saw him in his universe, which was the like base universe number. But all those branches also do have their own universe designation numbers. And that's like where it gets kind of confusing because it didn't seem like Deadpool would have been living in the original like sacred timeline of the Fox film franchise. So that was like a little bit off compared to like what fans know those universes to be. But I guess they just wanted to simplify it and they just like kind of put it under one umbrella, which is their sacred timeline, which would be the original universe designation, which was 10005 from the first X-Men movie. And that's something that I've been waiting for the MCU to do ever since Across the Spider-Verse did it with all of their different universes, because they go to different universes in that movie and they give them all their numbers. But we didn't never got that in the MCU until now. I hope they continue to do that and do that even more. So in Secret Wars, like if we go to other universes in Secret Wars or in Doomsday, the Avengers movie before Secret Wars, I hope they give those numbers that are already established. Like fans know about them. They each have their own name already that we know about. I hope they put them in there if we go there. If not, they could still say like which universe they're coming from. Like there could still be somebody kind of keeping track of that within the movie, like a Doctor Strange or somebody like that. So like that's what I want to see continue. Something else that they could have done better is they should have illustrated the stakes better with Deadpool's universe by instead of the way that they did it, which was that they established that the universe is not going to die right away. So Deadpool would be able to live his whole life with his friends if it wasn't for Paradox, because it would die over thousands of years. But it's doomed. Like there's no way it'll ever come back. Uh, at least from what he thinks. So Paradox's whole thing, which kind of makes him the main bad guy of the movie, is that he just wants to kill it right away, and that's where Deadpool comes at odds with him in the movie. That's why he busts his face. They should have not made it like that. They should have made it so that it was actually actively dying in the moment, and maybe it could have still been something that Paradox was doing, like whatever he was doing. It could have been like a slow process to kill it, but it was faster than it would have been if he hadn't done anything, like gotten involved at all directly. And they could have showed, it would have added to the stakes of like Deadpool's family being like, what the fuck is going on? And they could have cut back and forth to them so that we could see like that they're in peril, because they were just fine, like they were just chilling at home. They didn't know what the fuck was going on. The only one person who knew was Deadpool himself. So we didn't really feel the stakes, or I didn't feel the stakes as much as we have in Deadpool 1 with Vanessa when she was kidnapped by Francis, or in Deadpool 2 with Cable trying to assassinate or just murder Russell, Fire Fist, the kid. So that was kind of one of the things that kind of holds it back from not being as good as the other two Deadpool movies. And then similarly, I feel like they should have also shown the scene of Logan finding the X-Men dead so that we could get more of his side of the story, because it's all just spoken on. Like we just hear him talking about it, and he doesn't talk about it for a long time until he sees the kid. He's able to kind of open up to Laura, and that's when we find out like what happened. And then later on, when Cassandra gets in his head, uh, we kind of see him go to their graves, and he kind of tells her about it. But we never see anything about what actually happened. We don't see him killing a bunch of people. We don't see the X-Men dead. So I just didn't feel it as much. Like Logan was an emotional movie. This one had some emotional scenes, but it wasn't an emotional like moment. Like it didn't actually hit. Hugh Jackman acted his ass off. Like he portrayed a lot of that shit just through his acting. But I think it would have been even better if we had seen what he saw, because we would have felt it more. And it didn't have to be the actors from the X-Men movies. It could have been just new people that were just in the costumes, but that we saw, because as X-Men fans, like because this movie was really for fans. It's not really for the general audience. The general audience can enjoy it, but it's for like the hardcore fans. We would know which X-Men is which without having the actor who we know them to be from the old movies, just from their costumes. Because obviously they would all have comic book accurate costumes because this Wolverine has his. So the whole X-Men would have their comic book accurate costumes. So they could have just shown their dead bodies and we would have seen Cyclops, Storm, Beast, Professor X, Jean Grey, and we would have known who was who. And I think that would have been enough for me to like feel it more. Um, and I don't know where like they would have put those scenes necessarily, like in terms of the pacing, what part of the movie and the plot structure, but I feel like it would have helped if we had seen some of that stuff. Another thing that I think could have been better, or at least I just didn't like in this movie, was Channing Tatum as Gambit. I was happy he was able to do it finally, but I didn't like his Gambit, and I don't think he. I never saw it even before we saw it in this movie. But I am happy for him that he was able to get it finally, get to do it, get to play it, and have fun doing it. But I didn't like his Gambit. It doesn't work. Channing Tatum's face, like I said, doesn't fit in that mask, and he has the Cajun accent, which Taylor Kitsch's Gambit from X Men Origins Wolverine I don't think really had. Like maybe he had some of a bit of an accent, but he didn't sound like Gambit like from the cartoon. Channing Tatum sounded a little bit closer, but it wasn't like a good accent, I don't think. And supposedly, some people said that he could do a perfect Cajun accent because his family actually, like somebody in his family, comes from somewhere in that region. But I feel like they played it for jokes. Like they didn't play it genuinely. So I feel like if they had, it would have been better. But for what it was okay because he was funny. But I feel like it would have been better if he would was actually like Gam because we could have, I would have believed it more, and I feel like it would have been more earned if he had played it genuinely. And some people want to actually see him still get a movie as Gambit. I don't want that. I don't want that shit. Keep that shit. We got to see him here. That's all I need, and I'm sure Channing is happy with it. I don't know if he wants a full movie still. If they're willing to give him one, maybe he will do it if they are. But I don't need it personally. So another thing, I feel like this one we don't really need, but I feel like it would have been cool, kind of going off the point about Deadpool's like family being a little bit of a bigger part, is that I feel like the X-Force team that was still around in the beginning of this movie should have gotten in on the action when they came back to his world at the end of the movie when they were fighting the Deadpool Corps. Because we saw Blind Owl, but that was, I guess, because they went straight to where the apartment is that they share, which actually I think seems to be a new apartment from the one that we saw in the other two Deadpool movies. Um, so I guess like it makes sense that X Force wouldn't be there, because like why would they be there in his apartment with just with Blind Owl? But I mean, fuck it, it's a comic book movie. I would be able to just suspend my disbelief, um, and just have them be there or just show up during that fight, just to have them, feel like a bigger part of the movie. Um, and I think it would have made the fight cooler too, because all of these Deadpool versus just Deadpool and Wolverine, obviously it fits the movie with the title, but it would have been cooler if he had a team himself, especially like an X Force team with Wolverine on it, because the X Force team from the Deadpool 2 movie was kind of ass, but this would have actually been kind of cool. And we never got to see them actually have a fight scene because they all fucking died right away. So it'd have been cool to see them actually get something like that here. But that's like probably the least thing that like I care about. So it's whatever. Another thing that I thought about is that when Cassandra went in Logan's head, when we saw him at the X-Men grave site, we saw flashes from all the X-Men movies, but it doesn't make sense because those would be the Anchor's memories. This Logan shouldn't have any of those memories because it's a completely different version of Logan. Because as far as we know, his world wasn't dying, so he's not even part of the like. branches around the sacred timeline of the X-Men Fox film universe. He's a completely different version. Yes, he's played by Hugh Jackman, but he's a completely different version of Logan. So he shouldn't share those same memories. Like I always kind of pictured Logan, the events of Logan, as him having the same history as all the other versions of Logan in the Fox movies. But this version should not have had the same history or knowledge of anything else. So it was just weird. It didn't make sense that we did see those kind of flashbacks in his head. If we were going to see any sort of flashbacks, it should have been his flashbacks, not the other Logan's flashbacks. It just doesn't make sense. So kind of goes to the other point that I mentioned about seeing more from this Logan's history. But now I'm going to talk about the comic references, which I did catch. Like, even though I don't know about comic books, like I don't read comic books, I have seen a lot of comic book imagery. So I've seen stuff that I know about, especially like watching videos online and stuff. And they had some fucking wild shit in this movie that was fucking dope as fuck. The fucking X crucified Wolverine shot where he's hanging on the X, which was actually used again in X-Men 97, but with Magneto. It was from a Wolverine comic book cover, and Deadpool went to a universe where that was happening to that version of Wolverine, and it was covered by like a bunch of fucking bloody fucking skulls. Fuck, that kind of hurt. And that shit was just wild. Just seeing that shit, and it was raining. The fucking aura of that scene was crazy. Definitely seemed like a fucking like apocalyptic sort of scenario in that version. And then the fucking Hulk versus Wolverine fucking cameo. That shit was dope. And Wolverine was wearing the fucking perfect costume, the brown and yellow. And that costume was fucking perfect. It was definitely, in my opinion, way better than the yellow and blue one. And then the Hulk, and they did the comic book cover where Hulk's face's reflection is in Wolverine's claws, but we don't see Hulk's face directly, but we do see his back because Deadpool, when he gets there, is in between Hulk and Wolverine, and then Hulk smacks the shit out of him into a fucking tree. But that shit was a cool little thing, and I would want to see that actual fight. And I don't know if we'll get to see it in the current mainline MCU because Hulk is not that Hulk anymore. He's Smart Hulk. But maybe if they wait until then, which would be cool if they do, we'll see it in the rebooted MCU after Secret Wars. And even if not, even if we see it earlier, but if they make it like a real fucking fight, like that'd be dope. Shit, man, yeah, like that was dope. Patch, I would say I was kind of underwhelmed with Patch. I thought Patch was gonna actually kind of be a decent part of the movie, but it was just one of these quick Wolverine cameos that we saw. And it was Hugh Jackman. I thought it was gonna be who other people have said it was probably gonna be, which was Daniel Radcliffe, who has always wanted to play Wolverine for a while. Like I think ever since kind of Hugh Jackman retired, I guess at least. And he seemed like he was gonna be shorter because Daniel Radcliffe is actually short. He's about the height of comic book Wolverine. He seemed shorter or like just smaller in terms of his shoulders and that in the back shot that we saw of him in the trailer, but it wasn't him. It was Hugh Jackman, which was cool still, but he still didn't get nothing to do. But I guess just for the visual reference, it was all right. Wolverine just stabbed Deadpool in the head in that part. And then we saw Henry Cavill as Wolverine, which was a fan cast for like the MCU version of Wolverine. And I never saw that either. Like similar to the Channing Tatum Gambit, I never saw Henry Cavill as Wolverine. I still don't see it even after seeing him here. But it was just cool, just for what it was. I think this was like the literally most kind of just like fan service in terms of fan casting cameo that we've gotten. Like John Krasinski as Reed Richards, I could actually see him playing Reed Richards like long term, but that was just used as just like a little fan casting thing for fan service in Multiverse of Madness because he ended up dying in that movie. This Logan obviously doesn't die, but I think it was just used for that as well. I don't think he's gonna be like the main MCU going forward. But he was the only Wolverine that we saw that wasn't Hugh Jackman. Um, and it was cool for what it was. And it was cool seeing him do the like Mission Impossible, like cocking his biceps, but pulling out the claws though. That was a nice little kind of twist on that scene in movie history, recent history. But I think Daniel Radcliffe would have been better. Like if they had anybody that was not Hugh Jackman as a cameo for Wolverine, I would have still preferred Daniel Radcliffe. Um, and even if it was just as Patch in that little Patch thing, like I said, I was expecting it to be more, but even if it was just that, I would have been happy with that. But I was okay with the Cavill thing because they did like do the beard thing and they gave him like some crazy Wolverine hair, so it was all right. But I do want Henry Cavill to come back to the MCU, and I really want him to play Captain Britain because I think he would be perfect, just at least from the look. And like I know he could act, like he can act, and he is British, so I think he would be perfect for that. So I hope we see that. And Captain Britain is a multiverse character too, so it would make sense for him to like show up in something within the multiverse saga. But I mean, there's only 2 years left of that, so maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they'll continue some multiverse stuff after Secret Wars, but I don't know. I kind of doubt it. We'll see what happens. But one of those Wolverine references that was hilarious was the first one actually that we saw, which I forgot was the first one until my friend Gloria brought it up. But it was the the short Wolverine. Um, and that shit was hilarious just because they made Hugh look shorter. Like, I feel like then he actually would be like he wasn't comic book accurate height Wolverine. They made him smaller than comic book accurate Wolverine. At least with the framing of like Deadpool, like he looked tiny. He looked like a little fucking like a little person. Um, but I don't know. Like maybe he was the height compared to the bar. Like, cause I'm pretty much the same height as comic book Wolverine, and I'm pretty short. And like right where I stand compared to a bar, it did look kind of like the same. But it's just funny because obviously Hugh Jackman's a tall dude, and they like made his proportions like look small. He just looked like a fucking little like dwarf from Snow White or something like that. So that shit was just fucking hilarious, and the way that Deadpool was making fun of him. And then there was some other ones that I didn't recognize, like the '80s Age of Apocalypse Wolverine. I didn't know that reference at all, but I found out later on. So that was cool. I had never seen that version of Wolverine with the like stump for a hand. I've seen a Aquaman like that, maybe even a Thor like that, but I think the only one I know for sure was Aquaman, but I've never seen a Wolverine like that. But that was cool, especially for comic book fans. And then some other like kind of Easter eggy things that I noticed were some other artifacts in the void. Um, there was Thor's helmet in the forefront, and I noticed that the second time I watched it. But Tyrone Magnus said that he saw it, and I saw his video before I saw the movie the second time. But something I noticed the first time was Cap's kind of triangular shield, and it looked more like the comic book version, which was different from the movie version that we saw in the first Avenger. So that was cool. Some comic book references in the void, as we saw in Loki. Um, and then now I'm gonna talk about the supporting cameos in more detail than I did before. So Johnny Storm, I already mentioned he was hilarious, more vulgar than I ever would have expected. Um, Even though I would have liked to see him come back again in Secret Wars, because he died in this movie, I don't think that they will do that. I think it was just a one and done thing for Chris Evans as Johnny Storm, Human Torch, coming back one more time. I'm happy with what we got here. And like I said, he was my favorite cameo in the movie. He was fucking hilarious. And that fucking post credit scene, fucking hilarious. Best way to end the movie. I think that was probably the funny post credit scene in the entire history of Marvel movies. So that shit like really paid off. Because I really didn't think he said that when Deadpool told Cassandra what Johnny said about her. I thought Deadpool was fucking capping. I thought he was just making all that shit up. But the second time when I watched it, like you could actually see Johnny, like he in the acting in the performance, you could see that he actually did say that, but he's like, no, shut up, don't say that. I don't want her to actually fucking kill me. And she does. She rips this motherfucker's skin off, and then basically like she does. Actually, I think she does him worse than fucking we saw Reed Richards get in Multiverse of Madness. But shit, that was fucking crazy. I was like, holy shit, when that happened, I was surprised. And I think Deadpool was too. We were shook, and Wolverine's like, "You got this fucking kid killed, you fucking idiot." And that shit was funny, crazy. And it was funny how Deadpool's like he's like fucking 40 years old, which is hilarious. But everybody's a kid to Wolverine though. Wolverine's been around 200 years, which he actually says in this movie. So that was funny too. I think that was in the car scene before the fight where he's like, "You really are the dumbest motherfucker that I've ever seen in my life," and that says a lot because I've been alive for 200 something years. Yeah, I fucking love that whole little sequence in the car before they. I think they had already been driving by that point, so it's after the road trip starts. But that whole fucking little part was my favorite part of the movie, I think. So Blade, like I said, he was badass as always. Laura, like I said, a little tamer, but still cool. But it was fucking crazy that she cut off Juggernaut's feet. I did not see that coming, but that's a smart ass way to stop the Juggernaut. Um, and then I guess she cut his head off too, like his whole head. She cut off because later on, when we see everybody fighting, his head's not there. His body's just like on the ground because he's like so fucking big. He's like Neely, and his head is gone. So she cut his head off, cut his feet off. She fucked that dude up, and then I guess took the helmet off of his dead head to give it to Deadpool or whoever it was to put on Cassandra. Oh yeah, and I guess something I should have talked about too was Cassandra's her fucking powers when she gets in people's heads. That shit was fucking nasty. That shit was creepy as fuck. And every time I see that shit, it's like, ugh, what the fuck? Fucking through the nose and shit, all the fucking orifices and the fucking eyeball. I think that part's the worst part. And I've seen some of the comic book artwork of that shit. It looks even creepier in the comics, I think, because it looks like she's actually like sticking her hand like through your fucking skin, almost. But in the movie, it's more like kind of like almost phasing. But then she like purposely pulls it out of the fucking actual orifices of your face. But that shit was nasty, man. Um, Electra, like I said, it was nice seeing her. And I had actually just rewatched the Daredevil movie with my mom, so it was pretty fresh in our minds. And even though I had watched that, like I watched that just in case she showed up because I had heard rumors. But even though I watched that recently, I literally was not thinking about it during the movie, and then she showed up. I was like, holy shit! Oh, she's actually in it. And that was like pretty much the same for all the cameos. The only one I knew because it was in the trailer was Laura. And before the trailer, she was kind of like the most obvious person to bring back because of Logan, but I still wasn't sure if she would or not. But I'm happy she was in here, and even though she was tamer, I like seeing her, and there's like room for us to see her more of her in the future, and I hope we do, and I hope she gets an actual costume in the future. Um, and I like the Daredevil reference too. I like how they reference like everybody that we saw here as the supporting kind of small characters. I like that they referenced their like loved ones who had already died in the void, getting eaten by Goliath. So Daredevil, her Electra's Daredevil was one of them. And somebody pointed out online that she was actually wearing his little belt that he wore in the movie. Excuse me. Um, and then they reference Punisher. We see his one of his enemies from the Thomas Jane movie, the Russian in the Void, but we never see Punisher himself because he had already died in the Void. But it was cool that we got like that we know he was there and we know why. his his enemy was there because his whole universe probably got prone. Um, and then Gambit, like I said, the goofiness took me out of it a little bit, but at least he had some cool action. Like the action was cool with Gambit, and we got an R-rated Gambit where like things weren't just exploding, but they were exploding with fucking guts and shit. So that was kind of cool, and they definitely did some cool shit, and they did some cool shit with him too in X-Men Origins. Um, but I think the like effect of like the kind of charged cards and whatever item he had, I think was better than it was in X-Men Origins Wolverine. But I like both. But I do prefer Taylor Kitsch's version more. But I think if they like blend elements, it would be the perfect Gambit. My fan cast for Gambit is somebody that somebody else has said, Austin Butler. I think he would be a good ass Gambit. He's got the hair for it and everything. Um, and then somebody else they referenced in the Void who didn't have anything to do with anybody else that was in it, but it was nice to hear because it's kind of an X-Men callback. Quicksilver, and we don't know what version of Quicksilver. It could be the MCU version. It could be the Fox version. It could be a brand new version. But we did see a Scarlet Witch reference in the Void. I think it was in the room where we get the like cameo group. Where there's a lot of kind of Easter eggs in there too. Like we got have the Hulk bed from Sakaar in there. Um, and we get the statue like from Wundagore of Scarlet Witch. So that was kind of cool to see. So I'm assuming maybe it's more so the MCU Quicksilver if we had that there. But I mean, we don't know because we never see it. But we at least got a shot out by name of Quicksilver. So that was cool. Now some of the other cameos, like the ones that were more in the background, well, Pyro, like I said, was more of a character. I like the interaction between him and Johnny. Like they had like a little scuffle. It wasn't really a fight, but it was a little scuffle. I think Human Torch deserved better because I don't think that's really how his powers work. But Pyro was able to like absorb all of Johnny's heat, all of his fire. So then he like fell down, and that's how they were able to capture him. And then they also captured Deadpool and Wolverine with magnets because of Wolverine's skeleton. Um, and I guess Deadpool was katanas too because they were also, well, either way they were metal, but they were also adamantium, I believe. Um, but yeah, that was just a little cool scene though. Fire versus fire, that was dope. Um, and then Juggernaut, it was a different actor from X Men: The Last Stand. Uh, so that was kind of lame. He didn't like look as good because I think he was a little bit smaller maybe. But at least they kind of called back to it. Um, a cool thing that we saw in terms of like the villain for Elektra's universe, which is why I believe it wasn't the same exact Elektra from the Daredevil movies, is that we got a black variant of Bullseye from that movie because he had the same look of Bullseye that Colin Farrell had, but it was a black actor playing him. So that was kind of interesting. I didn't expect that. I was like, oh shit, that's Bullseye. Um, I think the only person who was the actual version that we had seen prior are X-23 and maybe Blade. I think they're the only versions that were the actual versions that we had seen before. All the other cameos were other versions of those characters from previous movies. We got Lady Deathstrike. I feel like she should have had a proper like one-on-one action scene as well with Logan, kind of like Sabretooth. But they do fight. Like when the fight starts between the six kind of Void Avengers, or I don't know what you would call it. I mean, that's kind of just the name I have for them so far, because they're a little group kind of avenging their own worlds by helping Deadpool save his. Um, there's some like kind of matchups in that like thing, but they don't ever go close up on any of them. We just see like the kind of chaos of it all. but he does start. Wolverine does start fighting Lady Deathstrike there, but I feel like they should have gone more like closer, kind of like the Civil War fight with the Avengers fighting each other. We did see like everybody fighting, but then they kind of went to specific moments with all of them. I kind of wish we would have gotten that here. Lady Deathstrike versus Logan round two, and Blade fighting Azazel kind of made sense because he's like a devil and he's a vampire hunter, which is in the horror sphere. And then Toad was all right. Blade was, I think, kicking Toad's ass too. And Azazel didn't we didn't see much of him, and I feel like his powers were underutilized. He was just kind of going side and side. He didn't really make use of like um, verticality like he did in X Men First Class, and he was fucking dope in X Class. I think one of my favorite Brotherhood. Well, I guess he wasn't really the Brotherhood. He was the Hellfire Club in that movie. But he was one of my favorites in that movie, and he was just kind of whatever in here. Like all of these kind of background people were. Um, Pyro was the only one who had a little bit more because he was kind of a mole for the TVA, for Paradox, I guess specifically within the Void. Um, and then I didn't know who this character was, but there was like a character that wore purple or had like some purple kind of like energy powers. And at first I thought it was Blink from X Men. She was in Days of Future Past, the beginning, like the future part of the Days of Future Past. But I think she's actually Psylocke, and people pointed it out later. And I do believe they're right that it's Psylocke because she had like the energy whip. At first, I thought she was teleporting, and that's why I thought she was Blink because Blink could like open up portals and jump through them, which is kind of like teleporting. So I wasn't sure who she was because there was also a new actress, but I think she was just a version of Psylocke, and she looked completely different. She didn't even look like any version that we had seen before. Um, at first, I thought maybe she was a TV character from like The Gifted, which I've never seen, but I think she was just a version of Psylocke. And then, like I said before, the Russian, he was just there to reference Punisher, which was cool. I don't know if he's like that well known at all outside of people who like really know comic books. But it was I guess kind of cool seeing him or hearing about Punisher. And I do like the line from Deadpool that there's been like five Punishers because we had Dolph Lundgren Punisher, we had Thomas Jane Punisher, we had I don't know the actor's name, but he was the actor who played I think Volstagg in the Thor movies and like this I don't know if it was the first one and the second one or yeah I don't know which one he was in, but he played a version of Punisher. Um, so that was three, and then we've at least had four. I don't know who the fifth one is. Maybe there's one before Dolph Lundgren, but the fourth one is John Bernthal, who's the best Punisher and from the Daredevil TV show, and then he had his own TV show. Excited to see him again in Daredevil Born Again. Um, and then we also had some vehicle Easter eggs in the void. I mentioned like the artifacts, but we had the Fantastic Car, which made sense because of Johnny's presence. And then we had the hot rod that Tony was working on in Iron Man 1. And I believe that Pyro was actually driving that car, which makes sense. It kind of works because he has fire and it had little flames on the side of it. I don't know for sure, but I think that he was the one driving it. So that's cool. And then we had the Moon Knight van, which we saw, well, I saw from set photos. And we actually saw that um, in the Johnny scene, I think primarily. Um, so that was cool. We had no other really real references to Moon Knight, I don't think, but it was cool that like Moon Knight got some love in this thing because there's not much of like new stuff in this from the newer part of the MCU. But Moon Knight got some love, so that was cool. Especially because Blade is in this, and Blade and Moon Knight, they gotta pair those two up. Um, and then Happy Hogan, uh, that cameo. That one, the first time I watched it, I was confused because he went to Earth 616, and I was like, wait a minute. I was confused because it seemed like it was before Tony Stark died, and I guess I had just like completely missed it. I noticed the second time that it did say before that scene started that it was 2018. So it was before the battle against Thanos, and Happy Hogan was like, interviewing people for a job, I guess, at Stark Industries, and Deadpool wanted to meet Tony Stark because Tony Stark's Iron Man, he's the goat of the MCU, and Happy like, no, I'm the guy that you need to talk to. You don't see him, and basically he wanted to be in the Avengers, Deadpool. I feel like this cameo was kind of pointless. Like I feel like we didn't really need it. I think maybe it was just like Deadpool's way of saying that he wants to be on the Avengers to the audience, like kind of knowing, like obviously in this movie he wasn't going to be on the Avengers, but it also, I guess it does add to the story a bit because Happy tells him something that he needs to hear, which is that the Avengers don't do what they do because they need to do it. They do it because people need them to do it, and that's kind of what Deadpool's arc is in this movie. He wants to matter, but he wants to matter just like for himself to feel like he is worth something. But he needs to matter for his loved ones, and he makes the sacrifice play at the end of the movie. So I guess that's why I was there, but I don't know. I didn't really need it. I feel like they could have done that in a different way. Um, Maybe it would have been cooler actually coming from an actual superhero. But I guess it was cool seeing it from Happy to show that Happy like knows, what it means to be an Avenger, even though he can never be an Avenger himself. Um, and I guess it actually kind of adds a little bit retroactively to his role in Far From Home after Tony's death, when he talks to Peter Parker in that movie. How he tells him like, you don't gotta be Tony Stark because nobody could be Tony Stark. And Happy's learned a lot from Tony as his career as Iron Man throughout these movies, and Happy was able to kind of share knowledge with Peter so that he could step into the hero that he is himself as his own, you know, big hero. Because before that, he was always like a more smaller guy, but he really took charge in Far From Home, and that's when he like really stepped up. Um, so yeah, I guess it was okay, but I was like wondering how the fuck did Deadpool get there? And I think he went there in his like whole escapade from the end of Deadpool 2 when he had Cable's time travel thing. So I guess the time travel thing was able to get him to another universe too. Like, well, I guess that makes sense. Like they did establish that in Deadpool 2 because he came to like the real universe to kill himself. Ryan Reynolds reading the Green Lantern screenplay. So I guess that was kind of set up in Deadpool 2 that he could do that. But originally I was confused because at first I thought it was like the MCU's version of Deadpool that was doing that, but it was like, the main Deadpool that went there to ask to be in the Avengers. But I don't know why like he went specifically to 2018 though. Oh, I guess it's because I think Deadpool 2 takes place I think the same year too. So I guess that's why. Like he didn't necessarily time travel. He just moved to that universe at the same time to ask to be in the Avengers. And I guess it's because he wanted to be in Infinity War. And I'm glad that they didn't do something like that where they put Deadpool and Wolverine in the battle of Endgame. Because I don't know. I don't want to see that. Like I'd rather they use Deadpool for something in the future with the Avengers, but not to put him in something that has already happened. Because we've already seen in Endgame like them revisit old stuff. I don't think we need to see that again. I don't want to at least. So yeah, and then B15, it was nice seeing her. Um, and she really seemed to kind of be running the TVA from the inside, which does kind of fall in line with what we saw at the end of Loki season 2. But we only kind of really saw her towards the end of the movie. I think once she realized, I think they didn't show her until Cassandra came into Deadpool's universe, because she was like, "Holy shit, what the fuck? A Omega level mutant in a timeline." She was supposed to be in the void. So it was nice seeing her. Um, Even though I do wish we would have seen like Mobius or somebody like that, but I guess it makes sense that we didn't, because it would have just taken too much out of this movie. So I think it made sense that they brought in a new character with Paradox and had him be kind of a rogue TVA agent. Um, but we still had some of that connective tissue with B-15 because she's the one within the TVA that's like looking over things. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the Loki stuff later. But just briefly, I want to talk about the Deadpool core members that we saw that I like noticed or could kind of tell who they were and who I know the actors that portrayed them are now. So obviously, Lady Deadpool seemed to be the leader, and she was played by Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds' wife, who a lot of people theorized would be the person portraying her. And I didn't know until after I saw the movie, I think again the first time, but before the second time I watched it, that Rob Liefeld actually based Lady Deadpool off of Blake Lively, and I think it was before she was married to Ryan Reynolds. Um, I think maybe Ryan Reynolds was already Deadpool in X-Men Origins Wolverine, but I don't think they were married yet when this happened. And she also just found out too from a post that she shared, and I saw that post too, and I think that's how I found out about that. So that was just really cool. I didn't recognize her voice in the mask, and then she never unmasks herself. But obviously, she shows up in the credits with her name. And there's actually a little kind of Deadpool family in this movie because obviously Ryan Reynolds as the main Deadpool and some other Deadpools too. Blake Lively as Lady Deadpool, and then Kid Pool, who's the next like major standout for me, is actually their daughter Inez Reynolds. Um, she was fucking hilarious. And then Cowboy Deadpool, who was voiced by Matthew McConaughey, who I did not notice the first time. I didn't pay attention to his voice. Second time, after I knew it was him, I definitely heard it. Dogpool, who I kind of wish Dogpool did more. Like, I wish Dogpool got in on some action. Like, I wish she was able to kind of, like, I don't know, bite somebody's head off or something. You know, get a little bit dirty, but she was just kind of a dog that was in a Deadpool costume. She didn't really do anything, except for make out with Prime Deadpool, which was fucking gross, but funny. Yeah, I was expecting a little bit more from Dogpool, but she was cool though. Headpool, who was voiced by Nathan Fillion, who I also didn't realize when I heard it, but very cool. And Headpool was funny. I liked the look of Headpool. The fucking like helicopter thing is just hilarious. And I didn't know about Headpool before this movie. I believe Dogpool was made for this movie. I don't think that was a thing from the comics. The others were. Baby Pool, I'm not sure about, but that was also a Deadpool family cameo from Olin Reynolds. I believe that's their youngest son, and I think he actually did talk. Nah, maybe not. I think maybe he just clapped and like laughed. But that was cute, and I was actually worried. I thought they were gonna kill Baby Deadpool. I actually thought they were gonna kill Dogpool when she came running from the portal towards Deadpool. I thought she was gonna get like hit by a car or something. I was like so fucking scared for Dogpool and then Baby Pool when they showed him. But luckily none of them died. We did see another Deadpool die though, who was Nice Pool, and it's funny because he's credited in the credits as Gordon Reynolds, who is not a real person. He's Ryan's fictional twin brother, who totally forgot about, but he did do an interview with him for his aviation gin company. I fucking hated him because I don't know what about him, but he was just like his face, like he was like for real annoying. Like some people might say that Ryan Reynolds could be annoying. I don't personally find him annoying, but Nice Pool was fucking annoying, and I'm happy he died. I mean, I'm sorry, rest in peace. But I knew he was gonna die as soon as he showed up, especially with the fucking gold guns. Just because I saw the gold guns that Deadpool Prime was holding in the trailer, so I'm like, oh, this dude's dying. I thought Deadpool was gonna kill him though. He didn't exactly kill him, but Logan thinks that he got him killed on purpose, probably to get the gold guns, mostly to get Dogpool because he wanted to adopt Dogpool, and Dogpool seemed to not like Nicepool, which was funny. I feel like maybe Nicepool was kind of like fucking like a weirdo, um, and I think that's why Dogpool kept running away from him. But I don't know if that's just me kind of overreaching a little bit. But I think the first time I watched it, I got that vibe a little bit because I don't know the way that that Dogpool was looking at him. But that shit was just funny though, and he got shot up, didn't regenerate. That shit was fucking funny. His head fucking exploding when Deadpool was like, "You're gonna live. Say you're gonna live," and then he said it, and then nope, motherfucker was dead, and Logan knew the whole time. And then we also got Samurai Deadpool, and that shit was funny. I didn't notice the first time that they at the end when they all like kind of forget about fighting Deadpool and Wolverine when he like kind of does the like little salute. He got the little arms. I didn't know why the fuck he was like that. At the first, I thought there was a version of Deadpool that just had arms like that, but it's because his arms got cut off in the fight before that, so they like regenerated already that fast, and that's why they were so small. But that shit was fucking hilarious. And then I didn't know who that fucking like I don't know like Voltron looking Deadpool was, but I guess I seen a video like literally just before I did this review that it's Deadpool 2099, and I had never seen that version of Deadpool before. But it was definitely a very like unique look. I feel like she doesn't look like any other character from the 2099 universe, so that's why I didn't even like imagine that that's what it would be. I just thought it was a different version of a future Deadpool, but that's what it was. So those are the ones that I like really noticed or like kind of care about. And yeah, my ranking for them is Lady Deadpool, Kid Pool, Cowboy Deadpool, Head Pool, Baby Pool, 2099, Samurai Deadpool, and Nice Pool. Um, there's like a Welsh pool, a Canada pool who was like wearing kind of the more X-Force dark costume with a Canada um, leaf on it. But those ones like were I didn't notice in the actual movie. But there's a set photo though of all of them, which is pretty cool. The last thing I'm gonna talk about for the spoilers part are some theories. So the wish that Deadpool made on his birthday in the beginning of the movie, right before the TVA arrived to take him away, I think was to become part of a bigger universe, which is an intentional pun on the line that Sam Jackson says to Robert Downey Jr. post credits of Iron Man, and then and more generally just to matter, because like that's his whole kind of goal in this movie. So I think that's what he wished for, and he gets that through the TVA. They knock on his door, and Paradox tells him like, "This is your chance to become part of this cinematic universe that is the Avengers MCU." And he shows them some scenes from the MCU because the TVA records all that shit. They made the movies within the universe with Kevin, Kevin, which we saw in She-Hulk, which I think we saw by the way in the Void in the little thing that we saw in the post credit scene. I feel like maybe that's the only time that we saw that in the post credit scene. I mean, maybe we saw it when they were actually getting taken to Cassandra's lair, but it had the little camera. I'm pretty sure that was Kevin or a version of Kevin that the TVA was using to monitor the Void. Um, so yeah, but Paradox's thing is like, yes, you were chosen for this higher power, and he wasn't chosen by Paradox. He was chosen by like somebody above Paradox. We don't know who. We don't know if it was B-15. I think it was Loki himself who chose him. But Paradox says that's why I'm taking you out before I kill your universe. And for that reason that he was chosen before all this shit went down, I think that Deadpool and Wolverine at the end of the movie, when they joined forces to kind of contain matter antimatter fucking thing to save his universe and by extension other universes that Cassandra was gonna go after. I think they did die in that scene because they showed the aftermath and nobody's there in the room that they were in. But I think Loki, because he needs Deadpool for something, he brought him back and he's like, I'll put Wolverine in there too since he helped you on this journey that you went on. And it's a journey that kind of mirrors Loki's own journey that he went on from fighting the Avengers to fucking being the god of the multiverse. So I feel like he has some sort of like kinship with Deadpool. Like he relates to him in some way, especially with like. Well, I guess maybe Wolverine. I think with Deadpool's arc, and then with Wolverine's arc, kind of maybe, where Wolverine has this brotherhood with Sabretooth, and it's like a very strained relationship, like Loki and Thor's relationship was. Um, so maybe there's something like there too on why he brought Wolverine back. But I feel like it's probably just on the surface, just because he helped Deadpool and he needs Deadpool specifically for something. And it'd be funny if it's just to fuck with Thor, because of the whole like Thor thing that that he accidentally saw in the TVA, where Thor was crying over Deadpool's like seemingly dying body, which was actually just repurposed footage from the Dark World, which I thought was just an alternate version of those events. But Paradox said that it's in the future though, so maybe this is actually going to come to fruition. I personally don't need it to, and I don't see why Thor would ever be crying over Deadpool. But I mean, I don't know. Anything could happen, I guess, in the multiverse. But it would be funny if Loki literally just needs Deadpool for that moment, just to fuck with Thor. Like that would be hilarious. I don't see this version of Loki doing that, but that would be funny though. We'll just have to wait and see. And then another theory that I have um, is I feel like after seeing this movie the second time, especially, I feel like maybe Hugh Jackman might just continue being Wolverine in even the rebooted MCU after Secret Wars, if he wants to do it. Because like Ryan Reynolds has said throughout the entire like press tour for this movie that Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. There hasn't been any other Wolverine, and nobody will ever be able to be Wolverine to the level that Hugh Jackman was. And I could see that happening. I could just see like, yep, Hugh Jackman is the one and only. Just like how Blade claims that he's the one and only Blade, which I actually felt bad for Mahershala Ali with that line because that's fucked up. Because he was announced to be cast as Blade a long time ago now, and he hasn't really been Blade yet. Even though he did have one line off screen that we heard in internals, and his movie has had delay after delay after delay, and there seems to be no good news coming out of it. I was like, oh no, not Mahershala Ali. I fucking love him, and I'm super excited for his Blade. So that was like, oh shit, that actually kind of hurt me as a fan. But as of now, though, Wesley Snipes is the one and only Blade, and Hugh Jackman is the one and only Wolverine. So I do think that Mahershala Ali, if he's still into it, will get his Blade movie. But I feel like maybe Hugh Jackman is the only Wolverine, and this Henry Cavill thing was just a low thing for some people who wanted him as him. But that's it. But I don't know. I hope they find somebody who is different, who like is younger, who could kind of sustain it over a longer period of time with the action and stuff for the MCU after Secret Wars. But we'll see what happens. But I think Hugh Jackman's definitely got to come back for Secret Wars, and I think he is going to. I think he wants to, along with Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool. And all I want to see, all I need to see in that movie is Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in a scene together. They put other people in that scene, which they most likely will, even better. But that's all I fucking need to see from that movie. And I think he actually said that he wants to work with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, so that would be cool too. Um, yeah, but I think I'm gonna leave it there. Deadpool and Wolverine, a fucking fantastic, super fun, enjoyable ride at the movie theater. All you can ask for a blockbuster, really solid fucking multiverse movie, even though I don't think it's as good as No Way Home because No Way Home had some better emotional beats. It was a good ride, and I think it did everything we wanted slash needed it to do. So thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time. And I did promise a Wolverine clause in my review, so I'm the best there is at what I do best. It's very nice. You seeing you above